The alarm screamed through the command center. 30 people froze. But the man in the maintenance uniform? His hand shot to his hip, reaching for a weapon that hadn't been there in 9 years. "Relax, maintenance guy," an executive laughed. "What? You think you're going to save us?" The room chuckled. Daniel Cole forced his hand down and disappeared back into invisibility. But here's what nobody knew. That maintenance guy once flew missions that officially never existed. And in 72 hours, when 6 aircraft would be seconds from collision, he'd answer with a call sign that would change everything. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button. You don't want to miss what happens next. Daniel Cole's alarm was set for 5:15 a.m. He woke at 5:14. 9 years out of the cockpit, and his body still refused to forget. Still woke before dawn like there was a mission briefing waiting. Still tensed at sudden sounds. Still reached for equipment that hadn't hung on his hip since he'd signed papers promising to forget it ever existed. He lay in the darkness for exactly 60 seconds, counted his breaths, reminded himself where he was. You're not Reaper 6 anymore. You're Daniel Cole, single father, facility systems coordinator. Nobody. He threw off the covers and started his morning. Coffee at 5:30, black. Consumed standing at the kitchen counter while scrolling news headlines he didn't care about. The ritual wasn't about information. It was about structure. Structure created normalcy. Normalcy kept him invisible. And invisible was safe. At 5:50, he walked down the hallway to his daughter's room. "Emma, time to get up." A groan emerged from beneath a mountain of blankets. "What day is it?" "Wednesday." "Worst day of the week." Daniel leaned against the doorframe. "That's Monday." "Everyone agrees Monday is worst." A 9-year-old face appeared, dark eyes, squinting with the focused disapproval of someone who'd thought deeply about this. "Wednesday is worse because you think it should be better, but it's not. Monday, you expect to suffer. Wednesday tricks you." Daniel felt his mouth twitch. She had his eyes, but that sharp logic came from somewhere else. From her mother, probably. Though he tried not to think about where anything had originally come from anymore. Some history stayed buried, for good reason. "Breakfast in 20 minutes, he said. "Scrambled eggs. Can you make them not taste like cardboard this time?" "I'll do my best." "Your best is very concerning, Dad." He walked back to the kitchen, smiling despite himself. Emma had been reading at a 6th grade level since she was 7. Her teachers called her gifted. Daniel called her the only thing in his life he'd gotten completely right. Breakfast was scrambled eggs and toast. Daniel's entire culinary range consisted of 3 meals he could make without burning the house down, and this was one of them. Emma sat at the kitchen table, cutting her toast into precise geometric shapes before eating it. "This triangle," she announced, holding up a piece, "represents the fundamental structure of load-bearing architecture." "You're 9. I'm advanced." "You're weird. I prefer intellectually curious." She bit the corner off her triangle. "Also, I need poster board for my science project. The big kind." "What's the project?" "Rocket staging mechanisms. I figured out how to build a working model." Daniel paused, spatula hovering over the pan. "A working model?" "Relax, it won't actually launch." "Probably," she smiled innocently. "I mean, not without fuel, which I don't have access to. Yet." "Emma." "Kidding, mostly." He shook his head and slid eggs onto her plate. She'd been talking about rockets for 3 months now. Last week, she'd explained orbital mechanics to him, using salt shakers and a grapefruit. He'd understood maybe 40% of it. She was going to be something extraordinary someday. All he had to do was keep her safe long enough to get there. School drop-off at 7:05 a.m. Daniel pulled into the Riverside Academy parking lot, stopped at the curb, and watched Emma gather her backpack. Got everything? Yes. Lunch? Yes. Homework? Dad? She gave him the look, the one that said he was being ridiculous. I've been doing this for 4 years. I've got it. I know, I just worry. I know. She leaned over and hugged him. Quick, fierce, the way she did everything. I'll be fine, promise. I'll pick you up at 3:30. I know. Be good. I'm always good. Emma, I'm mostly always good. She climbed out, backpack bouncing, and walked toward the double doors. Daniel watched until she disappeared inside. Then he counted to 10. 1, 2, 3. This was the ritual, every single day. 4, 5, 6. Watch her go in, count to 10. Make sure she's safe inside walls where bad things can't reach her. 7, 8, 9. For the next 8 hours, the world couldn't touch what mattered most. 10. He put the car in drive and headed for Apex Defense Technologies. Badge scan at 7:38 a.m. Not early enough to seem ambitious, not late enough to be noticed. Daniel walked through the south entrance, took the service elevator to avoid the main lobby, and followed the maintenance corridors to the equipment management office. His workspace smelled like industrial coffee and old printer toner. Nobody important ever came down here. That was the point. His official job title was Facility Systems Coordinator. It sounded technical and meant almost nothing. He managed inventories, scheduled equipment maintenance, made sure the right supplies reached the right departments at the right times. Critical work that became invisible the moment it functioned correctly. Nobody at Apex knew what Daniel had been before this. They saw a single father with steady hands and zero ambition. They saw someone who showed up consistently, performed adequately, and never volunteered for visibility. They saw exactly what Daniel had spent 9 years constructing. A person so unremarkable that memory couldn't find purchase. Cole. He looked up. His supervisor, Frank Morrison, stood in the doorway with a tablet. Need you in the executive strategy session this afternoon. Regular facilities rep called in sick. What do they need? Climate control monitoring. Big presentation. Lots of brass. Just stand in the back and make sure nothing overheats. Frank shrugged. Easy day. Daniel nodded. Got it. Frank disappeared. Daniel looked at the calendar on his desk. The executive strategy session was for the DAFFN project, the Distributed Autonomous Flight Network. 6 unmanned aircraft coordinated through a single AI system. The crown jewel that would determine whether Apex won a $900 million defense contract. He'd been avoiding that project for 3 weeks, because the more he learned about it, the more familiar it seemed. And familiarity was dangerous. The strategy sessions started at 2 p.m. Daniel positioned himself in his customary location, back corner, near the emergency exit, outside the cone of importance. He held his tablet angled toward his chest, posture suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. Which he would. Victoria Chen commanded the front of the room, CEO of Apex Defense Technologies, 43 years old, former Navy logistics officer turned defense industry executive. She spoke in complete paragraphs constructed from data points, each sentence reinforced with metrics that had been validated by 3 separate departments. Her presentations didn't inspire. They convinced. Our distributed autonomous flight network represents the future of military aviation, she was saying. 6 unmanned aircraft coordinated through a single AI system. Real-time threat assessment. Dynamic mission adaptation. 0 human latency. She clicked to the next slide. This isn't evolution. It's revolution. Daniel kept his eyes on this tablet, pretending to monitor climate control readings that required no monitoring. He'd heard variations of this presentation 4 times now. The language changed. Machine learning, predictive algorithms, next-generation architecture. But the promise stayed the same. Technology would eliminate human weakness. He'd heard that promise before. He'd watched it fail. At 2:47 p.m., the test alarm sounded. Standard safety protocol. Quarterly system verification. Everyone in the room had experienced it before. Most reactions were minimal. A brief glance upward, a momentary pause in typing, then an immediate return to importance. Daniel's body betrayed 9 years of discipline. His weight shifted forward, his shoulders squared. His head tilted precisely 12 degrees toward the sound source. Calculating distance, threat level, response options. His right hand moved toward his hip, fingers reaching for equipment that hadn't hung there since. "Whoa, whoa!" The voice came from across the room. Brad Hollister, VP of Marketing, grinning like he'd just witnessed something hilarious. "Easy there, maintenance guy. It's just a drill." A few people chuckled. Daniel froze. His hand was halfway to his hip, exposed, visible, the exact opposite of everything he'd built. "What, you think you're going to save us?" Brad continued, playing to the crowd. "Leave the heroics to the professionals, buddy. Just make sure the AC keeps working." More laughter, scattered, polite. The kind of laughter that wasn't really about humor. It was about establishing hierarchy, reminding everyone who mattered and who didn't. Daniel forced his hand down, reset his posture to practiced invisibility. "Sorry," he said quietly. "Reflex." "Hell of a reflex." Brad turned back to the presentation, still grinning. "Anyway, Victoria, you were saying?" The meeting continued. Daniel stood in the back corner, face neutral, heart hammering. But across the room, Victoria Chen was watching him. She'd been mid-sentence about competitive advantages when her peripheral vision caught the movement. Her words had continued without interruption. Years of military briefings had taught her not to pause for distractions. But her eyes had tracked the anomaly. The way he'd moved, the precision of it, the automatic reach toward his hip. That wasn't civilian reflex. That was training. She filed it away, marked it for later analysis, and returned to her presentation. The meeting ended at 3:35 p.m. Daniel checked his watch as people dispersed. 2 hours and 10 minutes until he needed to leave. He gathered his tablet and headed for the door. "Mr. Cole." He stopped. Victoria Chen stood 3 feet away, her chief of staff trailing behind with 2 tablets and an expression of permanent crisis management. "Ma'am?" "Interesting reflexes back there." Daniel kept his face neutral. "Like I said, just reflex." "That's military movement. The head tilt, the weight shift, the reach for your hip." Her eyes were cool, analytical. "Where'd you serve?" "I didn't." "Really?" "I have a cousin in the Army. Spent some time with him growing up. Must have picked up habits." Victoria studied him for a moment. Her expression revealed nothing. "Right," she said finally. "Habits." She walked past him without another word. Daniel exhaled slowly and headed for the exit. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. She noticed. Stay calm.
It doesn't mean anything. People notice things all the time. It doesn't mean... His phone buzzed. Message from Emma's school. Mr. Cole, Emma has a headache and asks to go home early. Please call the office. Daniel checked the time. 3:42 p.m. He could leave now, pick her up, take her home, be the father who was always there when needed. He started walking faster. Victoria Chen sat in her office at 4:15 p.m., staring at a personnel file that made no sense. Marcus Webb had been her first search, but no results. She'd tried Daniel Cole next. The basic information was ordinary enough. Facility Systems Coordinator. Employed 27 months. Performance reviews consistently mediocre. Not problematic enough to warrant intervention, not exceptional enough to merit advancement. Standard background verification completed. Previous employment, equipment specialist at a logistics firm in New Mexico. And then, before that, nothing. 9 years of nothing. No employment records, no tax filings, no credit activity, no digital footprint whatsoever. Just a gap labeled Extended Family Leave with no supporting documentation. Victoria had seen employment gaps before. Medical issues generated insurance paperwork. Legal problems created court records. Even witness protection programs left administrative traces if you knew where to look. 9 years of complete digital absence meant something else entirely. She pulled up the security footage from the strategy session, found the timestamp of the test alarm, watched Daniel's reaction frame by frame. The movement was subtle but unmistakable. Weight shift, postural change, the reaching gesture toward his hip. And she leaned closer to the screen. His mouth had moved. He'd said something, too quiet for the microphones to catch. She ran the footage through lip-reading software. The result came back. Check 6. Military terminology. Pilot slang for look behind you. Victoria felt something cold settle in her chest. She opened a secondary database, one requiring executive clearance and biometric authentication. Submitted a query to the Department of Defense Civilian Personnel Archive. Response: no records found. Standard result: most civilians never worked defense contracts. She ran a tertiary query through the classified contractor database, searching for expunged records, sealed files, redacted personnel transfers. Response: query flagged. Insufficient clearance. Contact DoD Personnel Security Office. Victoria leaned back. One more try. She opened her highest clearance terminal and submitted a direct query to the Defense Intelligence Agency Personnel Database, a system she wasn't technically authorized to access, but had maintained backdoor credentials for since her Navy days. The response took 93 seconds. Records sealed under National Security Directive 47B. Clearance TS/SCI. Required. Contact DoD Special Access Programs Office. Victoria closed her eyes. She'd held TS/SCI clearance during her Navy service. She knew exactly what National Security Directive 47B covered. Personnel involved in black operations, covert actions, incidents requiring complete identity erasure for operational security. She ran one final query, searching for any mention of Daniel Cole in unclassified military incident reports from 9 years ago. One result appeared: a brief mention in a Congressional Armed Services Committee hearing transcript. A representative from Nevada asking about safety protocols following the incident involving personnel subsequently removed from service. The response from the DoD representative: all relevant personnel have been appropriately debriefed and transitioned. No further comment authorized. Victoria closed the terminal.
Daniel Cole had been someone important enough to erase completely. Important enough that even now, 9 years later, his records remain sealed under directives reserved for the most sensitive operations. And Brad Hollister had laughed at him, called him maintenance guy. She made a note in her encrypted personal log. Cole, Daniel. Investigate further. Priority, medium. Method, observation, not interrogation. In her experience, the most useful information came from watching how people behaved when they thought nobody was looking. Daniel pulled into the school parking lot at 4:05 p.m. Emma was waiting in the office, looking smaller than usual. Her face was pale, but she smiled when she saw him. "Hey, kiddo. How's the head?" "Better, mostly. It was really bad during math, but math always gives me a headache, so maybe that was the problem." The school nurse handed Daniel a form to sign. "No fever, probably just needs rest and water." "Thanks." He signed the form and took Emma's backpack. "Come on, let's get you home." In the car, Emma leaned her head against the window. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Why did that man call you maintenance guy today?" Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What?" "I heard you on the phone with someone at work. You had it on speaker while you were making coffee this morning. Someone called you maintenance guy, and everyone laughed." Daniel exhaled slowly. He'd forgotten about that call with Frank, recapping the meeting. He hadn't realized Emma was awake. "It's nothing, honey, just work stuff." "But why did they laugh?" "Because," he searched for words, "because some people think certain jobs are more important than others, and they think my job isn't very important." "That's dumb." "Yeah, it is." "Your job is important. You make sure everything works. If you didn't do your job, their jobs wouldn't work either." Daniel smiled. "That's very logical." "I'm always logical." She paused. "Also, that man sounds like a jerk." "Emma." "What? He does." "You're not wrong, but we don't call people jerks." "What do we call them?" "Professionally challenged in interpersonal dynamics." Emma snorted. "That's way too many words, Dad." "Fine, he's a jerk. But don't tell anyone I said that." "Our secret." They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Emma spoke again, quieter this time. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Were you ever someone important?" Daniel's heart stopped. She's 9. She doesn't know anything. She's just asking a question. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Sometimes you do things that seem different. Like this morning, when that alarm went off on the phone. You stood up really fast, like you were ready to do something." "It was just a reflex." "Yeah, but what kind of reflex?" She looked at him, those dark eyes seeing more than a 9-year-old should. "Normal people don't have reflexes like that." Daniel pulled into their driveway, parked, sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel. "Emma, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." "Okay." "A long time ago, before you were born, I had a different job. A job that was important and dangerous. But when you came into the world, I had to make a choice. Keep doing that job, or be here with you, every single day. And you chose me." "I chose you, without hesitation." Emma nodded slowly, processing this. "Do you miss the other job?" "Sometimes." "Do you wish you'd chosen different?" Daniel reached over and took her hand. "Not for 1 second, Emma. Not ever. Being your dad is the most important thing I've ever done. Nothing else comes close." She squeezed his hand, smiled. Good answer. Thanks. Now let's get you inside. Rest and water, the nurse said. Can I watch TV while I rest? Nice try. It was worth a shot. They went inside, and Daniel made her soup, one of the 3 meals he could handle, and sat with her on the couch while she read a book about astrophysics that was definitely not age-appropriate, but that she'd insisted on anyway. At 5:45, right on schedule, he started dinner. At 6:30, they ate together. At 7:30, homework. At 8:30, bedtime. Routine, structure, normalcy, the foundation of everything. But as Daniel lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. Victoria Chen had looked at him like she was solving a puzzle. The DAFFN project was moving toward final demonstration, and somewhere in the back of his mind, buried under 9 years of carefully constructed invisibility, a warning bell was starting to ring. He'd seen that timing drift before. He knew what it meant, and he was running out of time to decide what to do about it. The next morning, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling. He went through his routine. Coffee at 5:30, Emma awake at 5:50, breakfast at 6:20. But his mind kept circling back to the strategy session, the DAFFN presentation, the 6 aircraft coordinated through a single AI, the timing synchronization data he'd glimpsed on one of the monitors. Dad, you're burning the eggs. Daniel blinked. Smoke was rising from the pan. He yanked it off the burner and scraped the blackened mess into the sink. Sorry, distracted. Emma watched him from the table, toast triangle suspended halfway to her mouth. You never burn the eggs. You're not good at cooking, but you're consistent. Thanks for the vote of confidence. What's wrong? Nothing. Work stuff. You said that yesterday, too. She set down her toast. Is it about those people who laughed at you? No, it's something else. What? Daniel turned off the stove and faced her. She was looking at him with that expression, the one that said she was going to keep asking until she got a real answer. There's a project at work, he said carefully. A big one. And I think there might be a problem with it. But I'm not sure, and even if I am sure, I'm not the right person to say anything. Why not? Because my job is to manage equipment inventory, not to tell engineers how to do their jobs. Emma frowned. But if there's a problem, shouldn't someone say something, even if it's not their job? It's complicated. Grown-ups always say that when they don't want to explain things. Daniel sighed. She wasn't wrong. Okay, here's the truth. If I say something, people will ask how I know what I know, and explaining that would create problems. What kind of problems? The kind I can't talk about. Emma studied him for a long moment. Then she picked up her toast and took a bite. You know what Mrs. Patterson says? She says that doing the right thing is almost never the easy thing. That's how you know it's the right thing. Mrs. Patterson is very wise. She also says you're too skinny and should eat more casseroles. I think she has a crush on you. Emma. I'm just reporting facts. Daniel shook his head, but he was smiling. He made her a fresh batch of eggs, unburned this time, and drove her to school. But her words stayed with him all the way to Apex. Doing the right thing is almost never the easy thing. The question was, what was the right thing here? At 10:15 a.m., Daniel found himself standing outside Engineering Lab 3. He'd been assigned to conduct an equipment audit. Routine work. Check serial numbers against inventory databases. Make sure everything was accounted for. But Engineering Lab 3 was where they were preparing for the final DAFN demonstration, the one that would determine whether Apex won the $900 million contract. He'd been avoiding this lab for 3 weeks. He couldn't avoid it anymore. Daniel badged in and walked past rows of workstations where engineers hunched over screens, their conversations a blur of technical jargon. Nobody looked up. Nobody noticed him. Good. He made his way to the equipment storage area in the back, tablet in hand, and started scanning serial numbers. Routine work. Invisible work. But his eyes kept drifting to the test monitors on the wall. Flight coordination logs. Timing synchronization data.
6 aircraft represented as dots on a grid, their movements tracked in real time during simulation runs. Daniel watched for 3 minutes, then 5, then 10. And there it was, the drift. Microseconds at first, barely perceptible, but accumulating over time. Microseconds becoming milliseconds, millimeters becoming meters, safe distances becoming collision courses. The signature was unmistakable. Daniel's blood went cold. He'd seen this exact pattern before, 8 years ago, in the cockpit of an F-35 over the Persian Gulf.
The memory hit him like a physical blow. 4 aircraft in tight formation, call signs Reaper 4, 5, 6, and 7. Automated coordination system engaged, everything reading green. Daniel was Reaper 6. His wingman, Lieutenant Commander James Jimmy Hartwell, was Reaper 7. They'd been friends since flight school. Jimmy had been best man at Daniel's wedding, the wedding that had lasted 18 months before his wife decided military life wasn't for her. Jimmy had been there through the divorce, through the reassignment, through everything. "Looking good, Reaper Flight," the controller's voice had crackled. "Maintain formation. Target acquisition in 2 minutes." "Copy, Control," Daniel had responded. "Reaper 6, all systems nominal." "Reaper 7, same," Jimmy had added. "Beautiful day for a milk run, gentlemen." It should have been routine, a training exercise with live coordination systems. Nothing they hadn't done 100 times before. But Daniel had noticed something. A flicker on his instruments, timing lag between his aircraft and Jimmy's. Microseconds, barely registering, but there. Growing. "Control, Reaper 6. I'm seeing minor sync drift between 6 and 7. Requesting manual spacing adjustment." "Negative, Reaper 6. Drift is within tolerance. Maintain automated coordination." "Control, I'm reading accumulation. Recommend Reaper 6. Maintain protocol. The system is functioning within parameters." Daniel had looked out his canopy at Jimmy's aircraft, 50 meters to his right. Close. Too close if the drift continued. "Jimmy, you seeing this?" "Seeing what? My board's green, brother. Relax." "The timing sync. It's drifting." "It's within tolerance. Control said so. You worry too much." "Jimmy." "Danny, I trust the system. That's what we're trained to do. Trust the system." 30 seconds later, the accumulated drift crossed a threshold that the AI couldn't recognize because it fell within program tolerances. Both aircraft received simultaneous course corrections. Both aircraft adjusted. Both aircraft occupied the same spatial coordinates at a combined velocity exceeding 800 knots. Daniel had overridden the autopilot in the final second, yanked his stick hard right, felt the G-forces slam him against his seat as his aircraft screamed away from the collision course. Jimmy had stayed on autopilot. Jimmy had trusted the system. The explosion had been visible for miles. Daniel stood in Engineering Lab 3, staring at the monitors, and felt his hands trembling. The same signature, the same drift pattern, the same failure mode that had killed his best friend. And in 3 days, 6 aircraft were going to fly that pattern in front of senators, generals, and Pentagon brass. He had to say something. But saying something meant explaining how he knew. And explaining that meant revealing who he was. And revealing who he was meant... His phone buzzed. Text from Emma. "Dad, don't forget poster board. The big kind. Very important." Daniel stared at the message. Emma, 9 years old, depending on him to be there every single day. If he revealed himself, there would be questions, investigations. The agreement he'd signed had been clear: complete silence in exchange for freedom. Breaking that agreement meant consequences, possibly legal consequences. Consequences that could take him away from her. He couldn't risk that. But he couldn't stay silent either. There had to be a middle way. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was not a woman who welcomed interruption. Daniel found her in the simulation bay at 2:47 p.m., surrounded by displays showing virtual aircraft executing coordinated maneuvers. She didn't look up when he entered. "Facilities," she said flatly. "I assume there's a problem with climate control or coffee machines?" "No, ma'am. I noticed something in the coordination logs." Now she looked up. Her expression suggested she was reconsidering her opposition to capital punishment. "The coordination logs." "Yes, ma'am. The timing synchronization data for the DAFFN system." "Mr. Cole, the logs are monitored by 6 separate systems, each with redundant verification protocols. If there were a problem, those systems would alert me. The timing synchronization shows accumulated drift. It's within acceptable parameters individually, but the accumulation pattern suggests potential cascade failure under high-stress coordination scenarios." Sarah set down her tablet, slowly, deliberately. "I'm sorry, did you just say cascade failure under high-stress coordination scenarios?" "Yes, ma'am." "And your expertise in autonomous flight systems comes from—" Daniel hesitated. "I've seen similar patterns before." "Where?" "I can't say." "You can't say." Sarah's voice dripped ice. "Mr. Cole, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You, a facility systems coordinator whose job responsibilities include tracking inventory and scheduling maintenance, are telling me, someone with 3 PhDs and 17 years of experience in autonomous system architecture, that you've identified a critical flaw in my system based on patterns you've seen before, but can't explain." "I know how it sounds." "Do you? Because it sounds like someone with no relevant credentials, no technical background, and no authorization to access those logs is wasting my time 3 days before the most important demonstration in company history." "Dr. Mitchell, I'm asking you to run one additional test. High-density scenario, all 6 aircraft, maximum coordination complexity, worst-case timing accumulation. That's all. We've run that scenario 18 times. Run it again, with manual oversight protocols enabled." "Manual oversight?" Sarah's laugh was sharp and humorless. "That defeats the entire purpose of autonomous systems, Mr. Cole. The whole point is that humans don't need to intervene. That's why we build them." "Because autonomous systems fail when they encounter conditions outside their training parameters. And real-world conditions always include something the simulations missed." "That's a philosophical objection, not a technical one." "It's both." Sarah stepped closer. Her eyes were cold. "Mr. Cole, I'm going to say this once. Your job is inventory management. My job is keeping this company operational through successful project delivery." "Unless you have specific technical credentials I'm unaware of. Credentials relevant to advanced autonomous systems."
I suggest you return to counting screwdrivers and let me do my job. Daniel held her gaze. And if I'm right and you're wrong? You're not right. But if I am, if the drift accumulates past the tolerance threshold during a high-stress maneuver, if two aircraft end up on a collision course because the AI can't recognize a pattern that falls within program parameters but exceeds practical safety margins, then the AI will correct. What if it can't correct fast enough? The response time is measured in milliseconds. So is the collision window. Sarah's jaw tightened. Mr. Cole, this conversation is over. People could die. The entire point of autonomous systems is that people don't die, Mr. Cole. That's why we build them. To remove human error from the equation. To eliminate the weakness and unpredictability that cause accidents in the first place. Daniel thought about Jimmy, about trust, about the system that had functioned perfectly within parameters while two aircraft merged into a single point of destruction. I've seen that philosophy fail, he said quietly. I've seen people die because someone trusted parameters instead of judgment. Sarah stared at him for a long moment. Who are you? She asked. I'm nobody. I'm just asking you to run one more test. And I'm telling you no. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. She turned back to her displays. Daniel stood there for 10 seconds. 20. Then he nodded slowly and walked toward the door. Mr. Cole, he stopped. Why do you care about this? Sarah asked. Why does someone who manages equipment inventory care about flight coordination systems? Daniel looked back at her. Because if I'm right and you're wrong, people die. Possibly people who don't deserve to die. Possibly people who have families waiting for them. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He left. Victoria Chen reviewed the audio recording at 4:15 p.m. Engineering labs had monitoring systems for intellectual property protection. The security AI flagged conversations based on keyword density. Cascade failure, high-stress scenarios, people die, manual intervention. Daniel Cole's conversation with Sarah Mitchell had triggered multiple flags. Victoria listened to the exchange 3 times. Cole's voice wasn't angry or desperate. It was the tone of someone stating observable facts to someone who refused to observe them. Calm, certain, almost resigned. She pulled up his file again. 9 years of nothing. Then she pulled up the incident report she'd found, the congressional hearing transcript referencing personnel subsequently removed from service after an unspecified incident. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in 4 years. DIA Personnel Archives, how may I direct your call? This is Victoria Chen. Credential verification, Alpha 7, November, Oscar. A pause. Verified, Commander Chen. How can we assist? I need information on a sealed file. National Security Directive 47B. The subject's current civilian identity is Daniel Cole. Ma'am, 47B files require SAP authorization. Even with your legacy credentials, I'm not asking you to unseal it. I'm asking if the incident referenced in the seal involved autonomous flight coordination systems. Silence. That's not information I can confirm or deny. Then let me ask a different question. If someone with direct operational knowledge of a 47B incident wanted to warn someone about a potential system failure, a failure with the same characteristics as the original incident, would that constitute a breach of their non-disclosure agreement? More silence. Longer this time. Commander Chen, I can tell you that operational knowledge shared for the purpose of preventing harm
is generally not considered a disclosure violation. The intent of 47B is to protect identities, not to silence safety concerns. Thank you. Ma'am, if I may ask, is this individual in a position where such a warning might be relevant? Victoria looked at the frozen frame of Daniel Cole on her monitor. Standing in Engineering Lab 3, staring at timing synchronization data. I think he might be. Then perhaps someone should listen to him. Victoria hung up. She sat in her office for a long time, watching the numbers on her wall displays, and thinking about the man who'd spent 9 years being nobody. A man who'd tried to warn them without revealing himself. A man who'd failed at both. Daniel picked up Emma at 3:30 p.m. He'd stopped at the craft store on the way. Poster board, the big kind, as requested. Emma's face lit up when she saw it. Perfect! Now I can make the staging diagrams to scale. What exactly is this project going to involve? Rockets, obviously. Obviously. But what kind of rockets? The kind that demonstrate multi-stage propulsion principles through mechanical separation sequences. She paused. Don't worry, it's all theoretical. Mostly. Emma. Kidding, probably. They drove home in comfortable silence. Emma worked on sketches in the back seat while Daniel navigated traffic and tried not to think about timing drift and collision courses. Dad? Yeah? You're doing the thing again. What thing? The thing where you grip the steering wheel really tight and your jaw gets all clenchy. You do it when you're worried about something. Daniel consciously relaxed his hands. Sorry, is it about the work thing? The problem you're not supposed to talk about? Yeah. Did you say something? I tried. And? Nobody listened. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, Mrs. Brennan says that sometimes people don't listen because they're scared of being wrong. And the scarier it is to be wrong, the harder they'll work to not hear you. Mrs. Brennan has a lot of wisdom. She's like 80 years old. She's had time to collect it. Daniel smiled, despite himself. Dad? Yeah? If nobody listens, and then something bad happens, is that your fault? The question hit him like a punch to the chest. I don't know, he said honestly. I've been thinking about that all day. What did you decide? I haven't yet. Emma nodded slowly. Well, when you do decide, remember what you told me, about how you chose me over everything else. I remember. I don't want you to choose me over someone else's life. She said it simply, matter-of-factly, the way she said everything. That wouldn't be fair, to them or to me. Daniel pulled into their driveway and parked. He turned to look at his daughter. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't listen enough. I'm listening now. Good. She gathered her poster board and backpack. Now come on, I need to explain the staging diagrams, and you're going to pretend to understand, while actually being confused. I would never. You always do. They went inside. That night, Daniel sat at the kitchen table long after Emma went to bed. He had printouts spread in front of him, screenshots he'd taken from the Lab 3 monitors, transferred to his personal phone. The timing drift was there, clear as day to anyone who knew what they were looking at. But who would look? Sarah Mitchell wouldn't. She'd dismissed him as an unqualified intruder into her domain. The other engineers wouldn't. They trusted their simulations, their parameters, their 17 years of experience. Victoria Chen had noticed him, had looked at him like she was solving a puzzle. Maybe she'd listen, or maybe she'd ask questions, dig deeper, find out who he was and what he'd done, and why he'd signed papers agreeing to disappear. Maybe she'd find out about Jimmy. Daniel closed his eyes and saw the explosion again. The fireball blooming against the blue sky, the debris falling like metal rain. Jimmy had trusted the system. Jimmy had died, and Daniel had been given a choice. Admit that his unauthorized deviation had saved his own life, while Jimmy's compliance had ended his, or accept responsibility for the collision and face court-martial. The brass had made it clear which option they preferred. Human override had interfered with the automated coordination. If both pilots had maintained protocol, the system would have corrected. Daniel knew it was a lie. He'd seen the data. The system couldn't have corrected in time. The drift had accumulated past the point of recovery. His manual intervention had saved one aircraft. Jimmy's compliance had doomed the other. But nobody wanted to hear that autonomous systems could fail. Too much money invested. Too many careers built on the promise of infallible technology. So they'd offered him a deal. Sign this. Forget everything. Become nobody. And 6 weeks later, Emma had been born. Her mother had taken one look at her, stayed in the hospital for 3 days, and then walked out. Postpartum depression, the doctor said. She'll come back. She never did. Daniel had been left alone with a newborn daughter and a choice that had already been made. He'd taken the deal because he couldn't raise Emma from prison. He'd disappeared because she needed a father more than the truth needed a witness. And now, 9 years later, he was sitting in his kitchen, watching the same failure pattern emerge in a new system, built by new engineers who trusted their parameters the same way everyone had trusted them before. He could stay silent, let whatever happened, happen, protect himself and Emma from the consequences of revelation. Or he could push harder, make them listen, risk everything he'd built for the chance to save people who might not need saving at all. Emma's voice echoed in his head. I don't want you to choose me over someone else's life. That wouldn't be fair. Daniel gathered the printouts and put them in a folder. He didn't have a plan yet, but tomorrow he was going back to Engineering Lab 3. Daniel didn't go back to Engineering Lab 3. He'd planned to. He'd gotten up that morning with a folder of printouts, ready to try again. But when he'd arrived at Apex, there had been a message waiting from his supervisor. All non-essential personnel are restricted from Lab 3 until after the demonstration. Security protocols. Frank had shrugged when Daniel asked about it. Orders from the top. They're locking down everything for the big show Friday. Don't take it personally. Daniel hadn't taken it personally. He'd taken it as confirmation that someone had complained about his visit. Sarah Mitchell, probably. Protecting her project from interference. He spent Thursday doing routine work. Equipment audits in buildings A and B. Inventory reconciliation. A discussion about ventilation filters that he barely heard. His mind kept circling back to the timing drift. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe the 18 simulations Sarah had run were enough. Maybe the system would perform flawlessly, and he'd spent the last 3 days worrying about nothing. Or maybe he was right, and in 24 hours, people would die. That night, Emma asked him to help with her rocket model. The staging mechanism is tricky, she explained, showing him the design. Each stage has to separate at exactly the right moment. Too early, and you lose thrust. Too late, and the weight drags you down. Sounds complicated. It is. That's why timing is everything. She glued a fin into place with surgical precision. If even one stage is off by a few seconds, the whole thing fails. Daniel watched her work. Timing. Microseconds becoming milliseconds. Millimeters becoming meters. Dad, you're doing the jaw thing again. Sorry. Is tomorrow the day? The big thing at work? Yeah. Emma set down her glue.
Are you scared? I don't know. Maybe. Do you think something bad is going to happen?
Daniel looked at his daughter, 9 years old, too smart for her own good, too perceptive for his comfort. I think something bad could happen, he said honestly. I tried to warn people, but they didn't listen. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. Emma nodded slowly. Then she reached over and squeezed his hand. Whatever you decide, I trust you. Even if it's the wrong decision? You won't make the wrong decision. You never do. Daniel wished he had her confidence. Friday morning arrived with clear skies and a weight in Daniel's chest that made breathing difficult. He went through his routine. Coffee at 5:30. Emma awake at 5:50. Breakfast at 6:20. But everything felt different, sharper, like the world had come into focus in ways he didn't want. Dad, you burned the eggs again. Daniel looked down. Smoke was rising from the pan.
Third time this week, Emma observed. That's a new record. Sorry, distracted. You've been distracted for 3 days.
She came to stand beside him, watching as he scraped the ruined eggs into the trash.
Is today the day everything either goes wrong or doesn't?
Yes. And there's nothing you can do about it? Daniel paused. There might be something, but doing it would mean complications.
What kind of complications?
The kind that could affect us, our life, our future. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, Dad, do you remember what you told me about the old job? The important one? Yeah. You said you chose me over everything else, and I said that was good. I remember. But I've been thinking about it. She looked up at him, those dark eyes serious. I don't think choosing me means choosing to do nothing when you could help. I think it means making sure you come home to me after you do the right thing. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest.
When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't pay attention.
He pulled her into a hug. She squirmed, but didn't pull away. I love you, Emma. I love you too. Now make me new eggs, the not burned kind. Daniel made her breakfast, drove her to school, watched until she disappeared inside, counted to 10. Then he drove to Apex, and he waited. The final demonstration was scheduled for 3 p.m. Daniel spent the morning in his office, pretending to work. His tablet showed inventory reports he wasn't reading. His eyes kept drifting to the clock. At 1:30, he walked to the observation deck. Security stopped him at the door. Authorized personnel only. I'm on the facilities team, climate control monitoring. The guard checked his list. I don't see your name. I was assigned to cover Wednesday's session, same role. Today's list is different. Sorry, sir, you'll need authorization. Daniel stepped back. His heart was pounding, but his face stayed neutral. Understood. Thanks. He walked away from the observation deck and headed toward the equipment storage building. If he couldn't watch from inside, he'd find another way. The equipment storage building was old, mostly unused now, but it still had a functioning terminal connected to Apex's main network. Emergency coordination systems, left over from an era when redundancy meant physical backup stations. Daniel had discovered it during his first month at Apex, cataloging outdated equipment. He'd noted its existence in his inventory report, and then quietly forgotten to mention that the terminal still worked. He badged into the building and found the terminal in the back corner, covered with dust but powered on. At 2:45, he logged in using credentials he'd technically been assigned for general network access. The system didn't distinguish between checking inventory databases and accessing flight coordination feeds. By 2:55, he had live telemetry from all 6 Sentinel-X aircraft on his screen, The countdown began. At 3 p.m., Victoria Chen stood at the command console in the observation deck. The room was packed. Apex executives in expensive suits, military procurement officers in uniforms heavy with ribbons, 2 senators from the Armed Services Committee, a delegation from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. 22 minutes that would determine everything. Sarah Mitchell stood beside Victoria, radiating confidence. "All systems green," she announced. "Weather optimal. Flight corridor secured. We are go for launch." Victoria nodded. "Proceed." Sarah keyed her console. "Sentinel flight, this is Control. You are cleared for launch sequence initiation." 6 aircraft on the runway powered up in unison. Their engines hummed with the precision of perfectly tuned instruments. "Launch in 10 seconds. 9, 8. Victoria watched the monitors. Telemetry streams flowing like digital rivers. Everything nominal. 3, 2, 1, launch. The Sentinel-X aircraft lifted off in perfect formation, 6 birds rising as one, their movements synchronized to the millisecond. "Beautiful," someone whispered behind Victoria. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Delta formation achieved, proceeding to waypoint 1. In the equipment storage building, Daniel watched the same telemetry on his dusty terminal. The aircraft moved like dancers, each adjustment mirrored by the others. The AI coordinated their movements with inhuman precision. 3:02 p.m. First waypoint achieved. Formation holding. 3:03 p.m. Second waypoint. All systems nominal. Daniel's eyes locked onto the timing synchronization display. Drift. 0.00 milliseconds. Perfect. Maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe the simulations had caught everything. Maybe Sarah Mitchell's 17 years of experience had produced a system that actually worked. 3:04 p.m. Third waypoint. Drift. 0.00 milliseconds. 3:05 p.m. Fourth waypoint. Drift. 0.04 milliseconds. Daniel leaned forward. In the observation deck, a junior engineer frowned at his console. "Dr. Mitchell, we're showing minor sync drift. 0.04 milliseconds. Sarah didn't look up. "Within tolerances. Continue." "Yes, ma'am." 3:06 p.m. Fifth waypoint. Drift. 0.21 milliseconds. Daniel's hands gripped the edge of the terminal. "Come on," he muttered. "Catch it. Someone catch it." 3:07 p.m. Sixth waypoint. Drift. 0.58 milliseconds. The junior engineer's voice came through the audio feed, piped into Daniel's terminal. "Dr. Mitchell, drift increasing. 0.58 milliseconds. Aircraft 2 and 4 showing proximity alert. Caution level." "It's expected," Sarah responded, her voice calm. "The compensation algorithms are handling it. This is normal variance during complex maneuvers." Daniel's blood ran cold. Normal variance. Within tolerances. The same words Control had used over the Persian Gulf. The same words that had gotten Jimmy killed. 3:08 p.m. Seventh waypoint. Missed by 34 meters. "Proximity alert elevated to warning," the engineer reported, his voice tighter now. "Aircraft 2 and 4 on converging trajectories." Alarms began screaming. In the observation deck, Victoria Chen's voice cut through the chaos. "Manual override! Now!" Sarah's fingers flew across her console. "Override command sent. AI should acknowledge in 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. "Override rejected!" Sarah's voice cracked. "The AI isn't accepting the command. It's prioritizing mission completion over external intervention. Unlock it. I'm trying. The system isn't responding. Daniel was already moving. He grabbed a headset from the wall, ancient equipment, but still functional, and connected it to the emergency coordination frequency. His fingers found the transmit switch. For 9 years, he'd been nobody.
For 9 years, he'd hidden the person he used to be, buried the skills that had defined him, pretended that Daniel Cole was all he'd ever been. But Daniel Cole couldn't save those aircraft. Only Reaper 6 could. He pressed the transmit button and spoke words he'd sworn never to speak again. Air Control, this is Reaper 6. I have positive identification on the aircraft. Request immediate override authorization. In the observation deck, every military officer turned toward their radios simultaneously. The Air Force liaison grabbed his transmitter. Reaper 6, identify yourself and location. That call sign is classified. Authorization Delta Niner Tango Charlie 6. I have technical knowledge of these aircraft. I can recover them. Victoria's head snapped toward her security chief. Where is that transmission coming from? He checked his screen. Inside the facility, equipment storage building. On the monitors, the telemetry showed aircraft 2 and 4 closing fast. 10 seconds to collision, the junior engineer announced, his voice breaking. Victoria looked at the Air Force liaison. He looked back at her. A decision that would make or break careers weighed in a heartbeat. Reaper 6, the liaison transmitted. You are authorized. Execute immediately. Copy, Daniel's voice came back, flat and certain. Executing now. Daniel's hands moved across the terminal with speed that came from years of training he'd tried to forget. He pulled up direct control interfaces for all 6 aircraft, bypassed security layers using codes that should have been changed years ago but hadn't been, and established manual coordination authority. 8 seconds. Sentinel-2, this is Reaper 6. Execute hardbank right immediate. Authorization override Delta Niner. 6 seconds. Sentinel-4, climb 600 feet. Execute now. 4 seconds. The aircraft responded. Daniel watched the telemetry, calculating trajectories, compensating for the timing drift that the AI still couldn't recognize. 2 seconds. Sentinel-2, level out. Sentinel-4, resume formation altitude on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The aircraft passed within 18 meters of each other, close enough that wake turbulence rattled their airframes. Close enough that the cameras caught the moment from 3 angles. But they passed. In the observation deck, silence. Then the junior engineer's voice, barely above a whisper. Collision averted. Aircraft stable. Daniel didn't stop. The timing synchronization was still corrupted. If he didn't fix the root cause, they'd have another near collision at the next waypoint cluster. All Sentinel aircraft, this is Reaper 6. Switching to manual formation coordination. Acknowledge. 6 responses came back in sequence. Sentinel-1 acknowledges. Sentinel-2 acknowledges. Through Sentinel-6. Daniel began inputting corrections manually, 1 aircraft at a time. Compensating for the drift that the AI couldn't see because it fell within program tolerances, but exceeded practical safety margins. It was like flying 6 planes simultaneously, using only instruments and instincts that shouldn't exist after 9 years of rust. But the hands remembered. The mind remembered. The training that had been burned into him during 1,000 hours of flight time didn't care about signed agreements or civilian identities. His fingers moved. Commands flowed. Aircraft adjusted. In the observation deck, Victoria watched the telemetry stabilize. The 6 dots on the screen moved in perfect formation again. But now the coordination was different. Human. Adaptive.
responsive in ways the AI couldn't match. "Who is that?" one of the senators demanded. "Who's controlling those aircraft?" "I don't know," Victoria said. "But whoever it is just saved $1 billion contract." Sarah Mitchell stared at her console, her face ashen.
The parameters had been correct. The simulations had been comprehensive. And yet, the system had failed. Daniel guided the aircraft through the remaining waypoints. He responded to the simulated threat scenarios, making adjustments that the AI would have made, but better, faster, with the judgment that came from understanding that parameters weren't enough. At 3:19 p.m., all 6 aircraft touched down in perfect sequence. Daniel removed his headset. His hands were shaking. He checked his watch. 3:21 p.m. 2 hours and 24 minutes until he needed to pick up Emma. He wiped down the terminal, gathered his tablet, and walked toward the parking lot. He'd made it halfway to his car when Victoria Chen stepped into his path. "Mr. Cole." Daniel stopped. His face had already reset to its default configuration. Neutral. Forgettable. The expression of someone whose only concern was getting home on time. "Ma'am?" "We need to talk." "I need to pick up my daughter." Your daughter is fine. I called your emergency contact. Mrs. Patterson says Emma is helping her bake cookies and asking questions about chemical leavening agents. Victoria's eyes were sharp, unrelenting. "You have 20 minutes." It wasn't a request. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay." Victoria led him back into the building, through corridors that suddenly felt different, narrower, more suffocating, to her office on the executive floor. She closed the door. She set the glass walls to privacy mode. She gestured to a chair. Daniel sat. Victoria remained standing. "Delta Niner Tango Charlie 6, she said. "That's a tactical authorization code used exclusively by rapid response pilots, attached to special operations units." Daniel said nothing. "Reaper 6. That's not a call sign from standard flight school. That's a designation given to pilots who flew missions that officially never happened, in places we officially never operated." Still nothing. Victoria pulled up a file on her display. 9 years ago, 4 F-35s were involved in an incident over the Persian Gulf. The details remain classified, but the outcome isn't. 2 aircraft collided due to autonomous coordination failure. 1 pilot ejected successfully. 1 didn't. She paused. The surviving pilot, who recovered his own aircraft manually, was offered a choice: accept immediate retirement with complete erasure of service records, or face court-martial for unauthorized deviation from autonomous system protocols. Daniel's jaw tightened. The court-martial would have argued that human override contributed to the collision, that if both pilots had trusted the AI, both aircraft would have recovered. Victoria's voice softened slightly. The charges would have been criminal negligence resulting in death. The charges would have been lies. Daniel's voice came out rough, raw. The AI caused the collision. I recovered my plane. I tried to warn him. He stayed on autopilot because that was protocol, and protocol killed him. So you took the deal? I took the deal because 6 weeks later, I became a father to a daughter whose mother decided she didn't want to be a mother. I couldn't serve time in Leavenworth when I had a 6-week-old baby depending on me. Daniel met her eyes. I chose Emma over everything else. I'd make the same choice again. Victoria sat down. What happened out there today? That was the same kind of failure? Identical signature. Timing drift accumulates within programmed tolerances, but the practical safety margins can't handle the accumulation under stress. The AI can't see the problem
because the problem is technically within parameters. It takes human judgment to recognize when parameters aren't enough. You tried to warn Dr. Mitchell. I tried to warn her without revealing who I was. I thought maybe someone would catch it. Someone with credentials. Someone who'd be believed.
And when they didn't, Daniel looked at his hands. The hands that had just flown 6 aircraft from a dusty terminal in an abandoned building. I couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't watch and do nothing while people... His voice broke. His name was Jimmy. Lieutenant Commander James Hartwell. He was my best friend. He trusted the system because that's what we were trained to do. And I watched him die because of it. Victoria was silent for a long moment. You broke your agreement today. The erasure, the silence, you violated all of it the moment you transmitted on that frequency. I know. There will be consequences, questions, investigations. I know. Are you prepared for that? Daniel thought about Emma, about poster board and rocket models and scrambled eggs he couldn't stop burning. No, he said honestly. But my daughter told me something this morning. She said choosing her doesn't mean choosing to do nothing when I could help. It means making sure I come home to her after I do the right thing. He looked at Victoria. So, I did the right thing. And now I'm going to go home. Victoria studied him for what felt like a very long time. 5:45, she said finally. What? What time do you need to leave every day to be there for Emma? Daniel blinked, thrown by the question. 5:45. Not negotiable. Ever. Understood. Victoria stood and walked to her window. Outside, the 6 Sentinel aircraft sat on the tarmac, intact and functional, because of the man sitting in her office. I'm creating a new position, she said without turning around. Director of Safety Systems Integration. You'll review all critical projects, identify potential failure modes, provide recommendations before problems become crises. No public profile, no congressional testimony, no media appearances. You work your schedule. You leave at 5:45, and you're paid 6 times your current salary. Daniel stared at her back. Why? Because I just watched a $900 million contract nearly fail catastrophically because my lead engineer trusted her simulations over a warning from someone with real-world experience. I can't afford to make that mistake again. She turned to face him. And because most people wouldn't choose family over vindication, over career, over everything. You did. 9 years ago and again today. That's the kind of judgment I need in this company. Daniel was silent for a long moment. My record is still sealed. The DoD will have questions. There could be legal complications. Let me handle that. I still have friends in places that matter. And Dr. Mitchell? We'll learn to work with you, or she'll find employment elsewhere. Victoria's expression was hard. Her system failed today. Your judgment saved it. That's the only data point that matters. Daniel looked at the floor, at his hands, at the window where the sky stretched out, infinite and blue. 5:45 means 5:45, he said quietly. Ironclad. No exceptions. Not for meetings, not for emergencies, not for anything. Ironclad. Then yes, I accept. Victoria extended her hand. Daniel shook it. Welcome to the team, Mr. Cole. She paused. Or should I say, Cole is fine. Reaper 6 doesn't exist anymore. He just borrowed my hands for a few minutes. Victoria almost smiled. Get out of here. Your daughter is waiting. Daniel stood, walked to the door, and paused with his hand on the handle. Thank you, he said, for listening, for not asking me to be someone I'm not. Thank you for doing what needed to be done.
even when it cost you everything you'd built. Daniel nodded and walked out. He made it to Mrs. Patterson's house at 5:42 p.m. Emma was covered in flour and grinning.
Dad, I learned about the Maillard reaction. It's the chemical process that makes baked goods turn brown.
That's great, honey.
Also, I think Mrs.
Patterson definitely has a crush on you. She asked a lot of questions about whether you're seeing anyone.
Emma.
What? I'm reporting facts. Daniel hugged her, flour and all. She squirmed, but hugged him back.
Dad, you're being weird.
I know. Did something happen at work?
Yeah, something happened.
Good something or bad something?
Daniel pulled back and looked at his daughter. 9 years old. Too smart for her age. The only thing in his life he'd gotten completely right. Both, he said, but mostly good. I'll tell you about it over dinner.
You're cooking?
I thought we'd order pizza.
Best decision you've made all week.
They walked to the car together, Emma chattering about baking chemistry and Mrs. Patterson's theories about why bread needs to rise twice. Daniel listened to every word. The sky above them was infinite and blue, and for the first time in 9 years, he didn't feel the weight of everything he'd left behind. The pizza arrived at 6:30.
Emma had insisted on pepperoni with extra cheese, which Daniel had learned years ago was a non-negotiable requirement for any pizza-related decision. They sat at the kitchen table, paper plates in front of them, the box open between them like a peace offering.
"So," Emma said, pulling a slice onto her plate with the careful precision she applied to everything. "You said something happened at work, both good and bad."
Yeah.
"Are you going to tell me, or do I have to guess?" Daniel took a bite of pizza to buy himself time. He'd been thinking about this conversation the entire drive home. What to say, how much to reveal, whether a 9-year-old could understand the weight of what he'd done. But Emma wasn't a normal 9-year-old. She never had been. "Do you remember what I told you the other day?" he asked. "About having a different job before you were born?" "The important and dangerous one, yeah." "I didn't tell you everything." Emma set down her pizza,
Her dark eyes locked onto his face with an intensity that reminded him, painfully, of how she looked when she was solving a difficult math problem.
"I was a pilot," Daniel said. "In the military. I flew fighter jets." Emma's eyebrows shot up. "Like Top Gun fighter jets?" "Something like that, except real. And classified." "Classified means secret, right?" "Right. I flew missions that the government didn't want anyone to know about. In places we weren't supposed to be. Doing things that officially never happened." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, "Is that why you don't have any pictures from before I was born? I asked Mrs. Patterson once why you don't have photo albums like normal people, and she said some families just don't take many pictures." Daniel felt something twist in his chest. She'd noticed. Of course she'd noticed. "When I left the military, I had to sign papers agreeing to disappear. To pretend that the person I used to be never existed. No photos, no records, no proof. It was part of the deal." "What deal?" This was the hard part. The part he'd been dreading. Something bad happened, Emma. During a mission. There was an accident. My friend died. Emma's face went still. "Your friend?" "His name was Jimmy. He was my best friend. We flew together for years." Daniel's voice caught. "There was a problem with our aircraft. The computers that were supposed to keep us from crashing into each other. I saw the problem. I tried to warn everyone, but nobody listened. Like at your work this week." "Yeah, exactly like that." Daniel took a breath. "When the accident happened, I managed to save my plane. I overrode the computer and flew manually. But Jimmy trusted the computer. He did what he was supposed to do, and he died because of it. Emma reached across the table and put her hand on his.
That's not your fault, Dad.
The military didn't see it that way.
They said if I'd followed the rules like Jimmy did, the computer would have saved both of us. They wanted to put me in prison for not trusting the system.
But the system was broken. You said so.
I know, but admitting the system was broken would have meant admitting they'd made a mistake. A very expensive mistake. It was easier to blame me. Emma's hand tightened on his.
That's not fair.
No, it wasn't. But they gave me a choice. Go to prison or sign papers saying I'd never talk about what happened and disappear. Become someone new. Someone who'd never been a pilot, never known Jimmy, never existed before.
And you chose to disappear.
I chose you. Daniel met her eyes. You were 6 weeks old, Emma. Your mother had just left. If I went to prison, you'd have no one. So I signed the papers. I became Daniel Cole, Facility Systems Coordinator. I became nobody. Emma was silent for a long time. Daniel watched her face, trying to read what she was thinking.
Was she angry? Disappointed? Confused? Finally, she spoke.
What was your real name?
Daniel blinked. Of all the questions he'd expected, that wasn't one of them.
My real name? Before you became Daniel Cole, what did people call you?
My name was always Daniel. Daniel Webb. But in the military they called me by my call sign.
What's a call sign?
It's like a nickname. A code name pilots use on the radio so enemies can't identify them.
What was yours?
Daniel hesitated. He hadn't said it out loud in 9 years. Not until today. Reaper 6. Emma's eyes went wide.
Reaper? Like the Grim Reaper?
It wasn't meant to be scary. It was just a name. Something that stuck.
Why 6?
I was the 6th pilot assigned to my squadron. Emma nodded slowly, absorbing this. Then,
so what happened today at work? You said something happened.
The same thing that killed Jimmy almost happened again. Different planes, different company, but the same problem.
The same computers trusting themselves when they shouldn't have. I tried to warn people, just like before. And just like before, nobody listened.
But this time was different. This time, I couldn't just watch. I couldn't let people die when I knew how to stop it. Daniel looked at his hands. So I broke my promise. I used my call sign on the radio. I took control of the planes. I saved them.
You saved them?
Yeah.
Like a hero?
Daniel shook his head. I'm not a hero, Emma. I just did what needed to be done. What I should have done 9 years ago, but couldn't because I was afraid of the consequences. Emma stood up, walked around the table, and hugged him. Hard.
You are a hero,
she said into his shoulder.
You saved people, even when it was scary, even when you might have gotten in trouble. That's what heroes do.
Daniel wrapped his arms around her and held on. I might still get in trouble, he said quietly. Breaking the agreement. There could be consequences. People asking questions, investigations. Emma pulled back and looked at him.
Are you scared?
A little.
Are you sorry you did it?
No, not for a second. She nodded, satisfied.
Then we'll deal with the consequences together. That's what families do.
Daniel felt tears prick at his eyes. He blinked them back. When did you get so grown up?
I've always been grown up. You just weren't paying attention.
He laughed, despite himself. You keep saying that.
Because it keeps being true.
She returned to her seat and picked up her pizza.
So what happens now? Do you have to disappear again?
No, the opposite, actually. Daniel took a breath. The CEO of my company, Victoria Chen, she offered me a new job. A real job. One where I actually get to use what I know to help people.
Like a safety inspector for planes?
Something like that. Director of Safety Systems Integration.
It's a fancy title that basically means I make sure nobody builds another system that could hurt people.
That sounds important.
It is. More important than counting screwdrivers, anyway.
Emma grinned.
Does this mean you'll stop burning the eggs because you're not stressed anymore?
I make no promises about the eggs.
Dad.
Fine. I'll try harder with the eggs. They finished dinner. Emma helped clear the table, her version of helping, which involved carrying one plate while Daniel did everything else, and then retreated to the living room to work on her rocket model. Daniel watched her from the kitchen doorway. 9 years of hiding. 9 years of being nobody. And his daughter had never questioned it, never pushed, never made him feel like less than he was. She'd trusted him. And today, he'd finally become worthy of that trust. The following Monday, Daniel walked into Apex Defense Technologies through the main entrance. Not the service elevator, not the maintenance corridors, the main lobby with its soaring ceilings and gleaming floors and people who actually looked at him as he passed. His new badge read, Daniel Cole, Director of Safety Systems Integration. It felt strange, visible, exposed, but also right. Victoria met him outside his new office. It was on the 4th floor, next to the engineering division. Glass walls, a real desk, a chair that didn't squeak. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Different. Strange. Like wearing someone else's clothes." "Give it time. The clothes will start to fit." She handed him a tablet. "First assignment, the DAFFN system redesign. I want your recommendations on manual override protocols by end of week." "And Dr. Mitchell?" "Has been informed that all future safety reviews will include your sign-off. She's not happy about it, but she's a professional. She'll adapt." "Or she'll try to undermine me at every turn." Victoria smiled slightly. "Also possible, but that's a problem for another day. Right now, I need you to focus on making sure what happened Friday never happens again. That's going to require more than just protocols." "I know. That's why I hired you." She walked away. Daniel entered his office and sat down at his desk. The tablet showed the DAFFN technical specifications. Thousands of pages of code, schematics, operational parameters. The same system that had nearly killed 6 people 3 days ago. He started reading. The first meeting with Sarah Mitchell happened at 2 p.m. She was waiting in the conference room when he arrived, her posture rigid, her expression carefully neutral. The kind of neutral that took effort to maintain. "Dr. Mitchell." "Mr. Cole." Her voice was ice. "Or should I call you Reaper 6? "Cole is fine." "Is it? Because 3 days ago you were a facility systems coordinator who couldn't be trusted to assess autonomous flight systems. And now you're my superior in matters of safety integration. That's quite a promotion for someone who counts screwdrivers." Daniel sat down across from her. "You're angry. I understand." "You don't understand anything." Sarah's control slipped, just for a moment. "I've spent 17 years building these systems. 17 years of research, development, testing. And you, someone I'd never heard of, someone with no credentials, no published work, nothing. You walk in and tell me I'm wrong. And then you're proven right, in front of senators, in front of the Joint Chiefs. Do you have any idea what that's done to my reputation?" "I have some idea." "I doubt it." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, "His name was Jimmy Hartwell, Lieutenant Commander, call sign Reaper 7. He was my best friend. We flew together for 3 years. Sarah's expression shifted slightly, confusion replacing anger. 9 years ago, we were flying a training exercise over the Persian Gulf.
Autonomous coordination system, just like yours. Everything within parameters, everything reading green. But I saw the drift, the timing lag. I tried to warn control, and they told me it was within tolerances. I tried to warn Jimmy, and he said he trusted the system. Daniel met her eyes. 30 seconds later, our aircraft collided. I overrode the autopilot and survived. Jimmy trusted the protocols. He died. Sarah said nothing. So when I came to you and said I'd seen this pattern before, I wasn't guessing. I wasn't interfering. I was trying to prevent you from building something that would kill people the same way the old system killed my friend. Daniel's voice was steady. You didn't listen. That's not your fault. I didn't explain myself well enough. I was too afraid of revealing who I was to make you understand the stakes. And now? Now I'm not afraid anymore. Now I'm going to help you build something that actually works. Not because I want credit or recognition or your job, but because I don't want anyone else to lose a friend the way I lost Jimmy. Sarah was silent for a long time. Then slowly, some of the rigidity left her posture. The drift pattern, she said quietly. I went back and looked at the data after Friday. You were right. It was there the whole time, accumulating. I didn't see it. You didn't see it because it was within your parameters. And your parameters were correct, technically. But technical correctness isn't the same as practical safety. How did you see it? Because I'd seen it before. Because I spent 3 years flying systems just like yours, and I learned that the gap between within tolerance and actually safe can be measured in lives. Sarah nodded slowly. I've been doing this for 17 years, she said. I have 3 PhDs. I've built systems that have been deployed across 4 military branches, and I missed something that you caught in 5 minutes. You missed it because you trusted your simulations. I caught it because I didn't trust anything. That's not a criticism. It's a difference in perspective. And the best systems come from combining both perspectives. Is that what you're proposing? Collaboration? I'm proposing that we build something together that neither of us could build alone. Your expertise in systems, my experience in failure. Your parameters, my judgment. Sarah studied him for a long moment. I still don't like you, she said finally. I don't need you to like me. I need you to work with me. That might be harder. Probably, but we'll figure it out. Sarah stood and extended her hand. Daniel shook it. Don't expect me to go easy on you, she said. If I think you're wrong, I'll tell you. I'd expect nothing less. And if you try to override my work without discussion first, I'll make your life extremely difficult. Noted. Sarah almost smiled. Almost. Welcome to the team, Mr. Cole. She left. Daniel sat alone in the conference room for a long moment, thinking about the strange turns life could take. 3 days ago, he'd been nobody. Now he was collaborating with a woman who dismissed him as a screwdriver counter. Progress. The weeks that followed were difficult. Daniel reviewed every system Apex was developing. He attended meetings with engineers who resented his presence, and executives who didn't understand why a former maintenance worker was suddenly essential. He wrote reports that got ignored, rewrote them with more evidence, and watched them finally get implemented when the weight of data became impossible to dismiss. He trained junior engineers to think beyond simulations. He taught them to ask questions like, what happens if this fails? And, what don't we know? And, how could we be wrong?
He built a culture where "I have a concern" carried weight, regardless of who said it.
And every day, at 5:45 p.m., he left. It became known throughout Apex. The director's schedule was ironclad. Meetings ended early when he was in the room. Deadlines adjusted. Project timelines accommodated. At first, people grumbled. Who did this guy think he was, walking out while everyone else stayed late? But then they started noticing something. Daniel Cole got more done by 5:45 than most people got done by 8 o'clock. He didn't waste time in unnecessary meetings. He didn't engage in office politics. He didn't pad his reports with jargon or his presentations with slides that said nothing. He worked efficiently because he had somewhere to be. And gradually, others started following his example. Engineers started leaving at reasonable hours to have dinner with their families. Managers stopped scheduling late meetings that could have been emails. The culture shifted, slowly but unmistakably. "You're changing my company," Victoria said one afternoon, 3 months in.
Is that a complaint? An observation. Productivity is up. Turnover is down. Safety incident reports have dropped by 40%.
She paused. "And people actually seem to like coming to work now."
Imagine that. Treating people like humans instead of resources.
It's a radical concept.
Not really. It's just what happens when you trust people to do their jobs and let them have lives outside of work.
Victoria smiled. "You sound like a management consultant."
God forbid.
Speaking of which, the DAFFN redesign passed military acceptance testing yesterday. Full marks across the board. They specifically cited the manual override protocols as best in class.
Daniel felt something warm spread through his chest. That was a team effort.
It was. But you were the one who made the team possible. You and Dr. Mitchell working together was something nobody thought could happen.
She's brilliant. She just needed someone to challenge her assumptions.
And you needed someone to challenge yours.
Yeah, we're good for each other. In a professional, mildly antagonistic way. Victoria laughed. It was the first time Daniel had heard her laugh in 3 months.
"I made the right call," she said. "Hiring you, keeping you."
Was there a scenario where you didn't?
Several. The DoD wasn't happy about Reaper 6 resurfacing. There were discussions about whether to press charges for violation of your non-disclosure agreement.
Daniel's stomach tightened. And?
I made some calls, called in some favors, pointed out that you'd saved 6 aircraft, a multi-billion-dollar contract, and potentially several lives. The calculus shifted.
What does that mean?
It means your record stays sealed, but you're no longer bound by the silence agreement. You're free, Daniel, officially and completely.
Daniel stared at her. I didn't know you'd done that.
I didn't tell you. You had enough to worry about.
Why? Why go to all that trouble for someone you barely knew?
Victoria was quiet for a moment.
Because you reminded me of someone. Someone I knew a long time ago, when I was still in the Navy. A pilot who saw problems that everyone else missed. Who trusted his judgment when the systems failed. Who saved lives because he was willing to be wrong.
What happened to him?
He died. In an accident that could have been prevented if anyone had listened to his warnings.
Daniel felt the weight of her words settle over him.
I'm sorry. Don't be. He made his choices, just like you made yours.
Victoria met his eyes.
The difference is, you got a second chance, and you're using it. That's all anyone can ask. She turned and walked away, leaving Daniel alone with the knowledge that he'd been given something rare, a second chance. And this time, he wasn't going to waste it. That evening, Daniel picked up Emma at exactly 5:45.
She was waiting on the school steps, backpack bulging with books, face lit up with a particular excitement that meant she had news.
Dad, I got an A on my rocket project.
That's amazing, honey.
Mrs. Thompson said it was the most sophisticated demonstration of staging mechanisms she'd ever seen from a fourth grader. She asked if I had help, and I said my dad helped me with the gluing, but I did all the engineering myself.
That's accurate.
I know, I'm very honest.
She climbed into the car.
Also, I think Mrs. Thompson might want to meet you. She asked a lot of questions about what you do for work.
Teachers always want to meet parents.
Not like this. She asked if you were single.
Emma.
What? I'm reporting facts. Again?
Daniel shook his head and pulled out of the parking lot.
How was your day?
Emma asked. Good. Really good, actually.
Did you save any planes today?
Not today, but I helped make sure the planes we're building won't need saving. That's almost as cool. Almost. They drove in comfortable silence for a while. Then Emma spoke again.
Dad?
Yeah?
Are you happy?
Daniel glanced at her in the rearview mirror. What do you mean?
I mean, before, you always seemed kind of sad. Even when you were smiling. Like you were thinking about something far away. But lately you seem different. More here.
Daniel felt his throat tighten. Yeah, he said. I'm happy.
Good,
Emma smiled.
You deserve to be happy.
So do you.
I know. That's why I'm also happy.
Daniel laughed. I love you, Emma.
I love you too, Dad.
She paused.
Can we get ice cream?
It's before dinner.
So? Rules are just suggestions for people without imagination.
Where did you hear that?
I made it up. Just now. It's my new philosophy.
Daniel considered. 1 scoop.
2.
1.5.
Deal.
They stopped for ice cream on the way home. Emma got cookie dough.
Daniel got vanilla because he was boring, and he'd accepted that about himself.
They sat on a bench outside the shop, eating their cones and watching the world go by.
Dad?
Yeah?
Thanks for telling me the truth. About who you were, about Jimmy, about everything.
Daniel looked at his daughter. Thanks for handling it so well.
I'm very mature.
You are.
Also, I've been thinking.
She licked her ice cream thoughtfully.
Maybe someday, when I'm older, you could teach me to fly.
Daniel's heart stopped. You want to learn to fly?
Maybe, if you think I'd be good at it.
Daniel thought about the sky, about the freedom he'd felt up there before everything went wrong, about the possibility that someday his daughter might feel that same freedom. I think you'd be amazing at it. Emma grinned.
Obviously, I'm amazing at everything.
And so humble.
Humility is overrated.
Daniel laughed and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They finished their ice cream and drove home. The sky above them was infinite and blue, and for the first time in 9 years, Daniel looked up at it without pain. 22 months passed. Daniel Cole's office had become something of a legend at Apex Defense Technologies. Not because of its size, or its view, or its expensive furniture. It had none of those things. It was legendary because of what happened there. Engineers came to that office when they had concerns that nobody else would listen to. Junior analysts came when they spotted anomalies that their supervisors dismissed as within tolerances. Project managers came when their gut told them something was wrong, even when the data said everything was fine. And Daniel listened. He listened the way someone who'd learned the hard way that listening could save lives. He asked questions that cut through assumptions. He challenged parameters that had never been challenged. He taught people that the most dangerous phrase in engineering wasn't, "I don't know." It was, "It's within tolerances." The DAFFN system
had been completely redesigned under his oversight. Manual override protocols were now standard. Human judgment checkpoints were built into every critical phase. The AI still coordinated, still calculated, still performed the millions of operations per second that no human could match. But now, there was always a human in the loop. Always someone ready to say, "Wait, I've seen this before." The system had won the defense contract. $3 billion, deployed across 3 military branches. Every pilot who flew with DAFFN received training on a new doctrine that Daniel had helped write. Trust the system, but verify with judgment. It wasn't a perfect solution. Nothing ever was. But it was better than blind faith in parameters that couldn't account for everything. And that was enough. On a Thursday afternoon in late spring, Daniel was reviewing safety protocols for a new rotary wing project when his phone buzzed. Text from Emma. "Science fair tonight. Don't forget, 6:30 sharp. If you're late, I'm disowning you." Daniel smiled. "I'll be there, promise." "You better. I worked really hard on this." "What's the project?" "It's a surprise. You'll see." He set down his phone and checked the time. 4:15 p.m. 90 minutes until he needed to leave. He went back to work. At 5:30, Sarah Mitchell knocked on his door. "Got a minute?" 15 of them. What's up?" She entered and sat across from him, the way she did now, without hesitation. 22 months of collaboration had transformed their relationship from hostility to respect to something that might, in certain lights, resemble friendship. Pentagon Review Board wants to expand DAFFN to naval aviation, carrier-based operations. That's a different environment. Higher stress, more variables, tighter margins.
"I know. That's why I'm bringing it to you before I agree to anything." She set a tablet on his desk.
"Initial specifications. I want your assessment before we commit." Daniel picked up the tablet and scanned the document. "When do they need an answer?" "End of month." "That's tight." "It is, but if we can make it work, it's another $2 billion in contracts. And more importantly, it's the Navy adopting our safety protocols as standard." Daniel looked at her. "You actually care about that? The safety protocols?" "I actually do." Sarah's voice softened slightly. "I spent 17 years building systems that work perfectly in simulation. You taught me that simulation isn't enough, that parameters aren't enough, that judgment matters." She paused. "I was wrong, Daniel, about a lot of things. I'm trying to be less wrong now." "You're doing a good job." "Don't get sentimental on me. I still think you're annoying." "The feeling is mutual." She almost smiled.
"Look at the specs. Tell me what you think. We'll discuss Monday. I'll have notes by then." Sarah stood and walked to the door, then paused.
"Hey, Cole."
"Yeah?"
"Your daughter's science fair is tonight, right?"
Daniel blinked. "How did you know that?"
"She emailed me, asked if I could come, said she wanted to show me something."
"She emailed you?"
"Apparently she got my contact info from the company directory. Very resourceful." Sarah shrugged. "I told her I'd try to make it."
Daniel stared at her. "You're going to my daughter's science fair?"
"Don't make it weird. I'm curious about her project. She said it involves autonomous systems. Coming from an 11-year-old, that's either impressive or terrifying."
"With Emma, it's usually both." Sarah nodded.
"See you there."
She left. Daniel sat in his office, processing the fact that his daughter had somehow convinced his former nemesis to attend a middle school science fair.
Emma had a gift for making impossible things happen. She got that from her father. At 5:45, Daniel walked out of Apex Defense Technologies. He'd never been late. Not once in 22 months.
The 5:45 departure had become so ingrained in company culture that people set their watches by it. Meetings ended when Daniel stood up. Conversations wrapped up when he reached for his jacket. Nobody questioned it anymore. They understood. He drove to Riverside Academy, arriving at 6:15. The parking lot was already filling with parents, teachers, and students carrying poster boards and model volcanoes, and whatever other projects middle schoolers built to demonstrate scientific principles. Emma was waiting by the entrance. She'd grown in the past 2 years, taller now, almost to his shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore the serious expression she always wore when she was about to show him something important. "You're early," she said. "I'm always early." "You're usually exactly on time. Early is suspicious." "Maybe I was excited to see your project." "You don't even know what it is." "That's why I'm excited." Emma rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "Come on, my station is in the gym." They walked inside together, navigating through crowds of parents and children. Daniel nodded at teachers he recognized, exchanged brief pleasantries with other parents he'd met at school events over the years. This was his life now. Science fairs, and parent-teacher conferences, and debates about homework. Normal things. Things he'd never imagined when he was flying classified missions over hostile territory. But he wouldn't trade it for anything. Emma's station was in the back corner of the gym. When Daniel saw what she'd built, he stopped walking. "Emma, I know, it's a lot." That's an understatement. The project was a scale model of the DAFFN system. 6 miniature aircraft, each equipped with tiny motors and LED lights, mounted on a rotating platform. A central computer, actually a Raspberry Pi that Emma had programmed herself, coordinated their movements. And on the board behind it, in careful handwriting, was the title, "Human-Machine Collaboration: Why Autonomous Systems Need Human Judgment." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "I've been working on it for 3 months," Emma said. "I read everything I could find about autonomous flight systems. I studied the reports from the DAFFN demonstration, the public ones anyway. And I built this to show how human oversight prevents accidents." She pressed a button on the controller, and the model came to life. The 6 aircraft began moving in formation, their lights blinking in synchronized patterns. "Watch the display," Emma said. A small screen showed simulated telemetry, timing synchronization, drift accumulation, collision probability. As Daniel watched, the drift began to increase. The numbers climbed toward dangerous levels. "In a fully autonomous system," Emma explained, "the AI would continue to operate because the drift is technically within programmed tolerances. But look what happens when I add human judgment." She pressed another button. A small figure, a pilot, Daniel realized, appeared on the display. The simulated human assessed the situation, overrode the autopilot, and manually corrected the drift. The aircraft returned to safe parameters. "The system isn't bad," Emma said. "It just needs someone watching. Someone who can see patterns that the computer can't. Someone who knows when within tolerances isn't the same as actually safe." Daniel couldn't speak. His daughter had built a tribute to everything he'd spent the last 2 years teaching people. Everything he'd learned from losing Jimmy. Everything he'd tried to explain to Sarah Mitchell that day in the engineering lab. And she'd done it at 11 years old. "Do you like it?" Emma asked, suddenly uncertain. "I know it's kind of intense for a science fair. Mrs. Thompson said I could have picked something simpler, but I wanted to show what you do, why it matters." Daniel pulled her into a hug. "I love it," he said, his voice rough. "It's perfect." "You're crying." "I'm not crying." "You're definitely crying."
It's allergies. Dad, it's spring. You don't have spring allergies. He laughed and released her, wiping his eyes. Okay, maybe I'm crying a little. That's allowed. It's a really good project. It really is. Emma beamed. Mr. Cole? Daniel turned. Sarah Mitchell was standing behind him, staring at Emma's project with an expression of pure astonishment. You built this? Sarah asked Emma. Yes, ma'am. By yourself? Mostly. My dad helped with some of the wiring, but I did all the programming and the research. Sarah moved closer, examining the model with the critical eye of someone who'd spent 17 years building systems just like this. The synchronization algorithm, she said slowly. Where did you learn that? Online tutorials mostly, and some papers I found in academic journals. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough. Sarah looked at Daniel. She's 11. I know. She just built a functional demonstration of human-machine collaboration theory. At 11. I know. Sarah turned back to Emma. Have you ever considered a career in aerospace engineering? Emma's face lit up. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to build systems like my dad saves. Something flickered across Sarah's face. Something that looked almost like emotion. If you're interested, she said carefully, Apex has a summer internship program for high school students. You're a little young, but I could make an exception. Unofficial observer status. You could see how we actually build these systems. Emma's eyes went wide. Really? Really, if your father approves. Emma turned to Daniel with an expression of desperate hope. Dad, please. Daniel looked at Sarah, then at his daughter, then at the model she'd built. A tribute to everything he believed in, everything he'd fought for, everything he'd almost lost. We'll talk about it, he said. That means yes. That means we'll talk about it. It totally means yes. Emma hugged him again, then turned and hugged Sarah, who looked so startled that Daniel almost laughed. Thank you, Emma said. Thank you so much. You're welcome, Sarah managed. Now please let go. I don't do hugs. Emma released her, still grinning. The science fair continued around them. Parents wandered between stations. Judges made notes on clipboards. Children explained their projects with varying degrees of enthusiasm. But Daniel just stood there, watching his daughter talk to Sarah Mitchell about autonomous systems and human judgment and the future of aerospace engineering. This was his life now, and it was better than anything he'd ever imagined. The judges awarded Emma first place. She accepted the ribbon with the calm confidence of someone who'd known all along that she deserved it. Daniel took approximately 47 photos, which Emma declared excessive but acceptable. Afterward, they went out for pizza, Emma's choice, always. And Emma talked non-stop about the internship, about Sarah Mitchell, about all the things she wanted to learn. Do you think she really meant it? Emma asked. About the internship? Dr. Mitchell doesn't say things she doesn't mean. But I'm only 11. You built a functional demonstration of human-machine collaboration theory at 11. I think age is negotiable. Emma grinned. I'm pretty awesome. Yes, you are.
Do you think Mom would be proud of me? The question caught Daniel off guard. Emma rarely mentioned her mother. The woman who'd walked out when Emma was 6 weeks old had become more myth than memory, a shadow that passed through their lives without ever quite touching them. I think, Daniel said carefully, that anyone who knew you would be proud of you. You're smart and kind and determined. You work hard. You care about things that matter. Those are qualities that any parent would be proud of. But you don't know if she would be proud. No, I don't. I don't know her anymore. Maybe I never did.
Emma nodded slowly, processing this.
That's okay, she said finally. I don't need her to be proud of me. I have you. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. You'll always have me. I know, she squeezed his hand. That's why I'm not sad about her. Some people aren't meant to stay. But you stayed. That's what matters. Daniel felt tears prick at his eyes again. He blinked them back.
When did you get so wise?
Dad, I've literally been telling you for years. You just don't listen. He laughed.
I'm listening now.
Good, because I want more pizza. You've had 3 slices. And now I want 4. Is that a crime?
It might be a medical concern.
I'm a growing child. I need fuel.
Daniel signaled the waiter for another slice. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Sunday afternoon, 2 years and 3 months after the day Daniel Cole stopped being invisible. The park was crowded with families enjoying the warm spring weather. Children ran and shouted and climbed on playground equipment with the fearless energy of people who didn't yet understand that gravity was a force to be respected. Daniel sat on a bench, watching Emma navigate the climbing structure with the mathematical precision she applied to everything. She was 12 now.
Taller, leaner, her dark hair longer than she liked to keep it, because she'd discovered that ponytails were aerodynamically efficient. She'd started the Apex internship 3 months ago, and every evening she came home buzzing with new knowledge about flight systems and engineering principles, and the 1,000 small details that made aircraft work. She was going to be extraordinary. She was already extraordinary.
Mr. Cole? Daniel looked up. A man stood beside the bench, military posture, tactical watch, the distinct bearing that only came from certain types of service. Yes? I'm James Wright. I just started at Apex, Systems Testing Division. Welcome to the team. Thank you, sir. Wright hesitated. I heard about what happened 2 years ago. The DAFFN demonstration? Daniel kept his face neutral. A lot of people have heard about that. I heard the real story, not the official version. Wright sat down on the bench, his eyes on the playground. I was Navy, fighter pilot, separated 4 years ago. Why'd you leave? Same reason most people leave. Decided there was something more important than the job. He pointed toward the playground. Mine's the one trying to climb the slide backward. Daniel looked. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, was indeed attempting to climb the slide from the bottom. She failed, slid down, and immediately tried again. Persistent. Gets it from me. Or maybe her mother. Hard to say. Wright paused. I heard you had to make a choice. The career or the family. I did. How'd you decide? Daniel watched Emma reach the top of the climbing structure and begin calculating the optimal route to the monkey bars. I didn't decide, he said. There was never really a choice. She was 6 weeks old. Her mother was gone. If I went to prison, she'd have no one. The math was simple. Even so, walking away from everything you'd built, everything you were. I didn't walk away from everything I was. I walked toward everything I wanted to be. Daniel turned to look at Wright. Being a pilot was what I did. Being her father is who I am. Those aren't the same thing. Wright nodded slowly. I struggled with that for a long time. Felt like I'd given up something essential, like I'd stopped being myself. And now? Now I watch my daughter try to climb a slide backward for the 14th time, and I realize that nothing I ever did in the cockpit mattered as much as being here for moments like this. They sat in comfortable silence. 2 men who'd been different versions of themselves in different lives, now exactly where they'd chosen to be. Hey, Wright. Yeah? The feeling like you've stopped being yourself?
It goes away. Not quickly, not easily, but it goes away. Daniel paused. And then one day, you realize you haven't stopped being yourself at all. You've just become a different version, a better version, one that knows what actually matters. Wright smiled.
How long did that take you?
About 9 years, give or take. So I've got 5 more to go. Maybe less, maybe more. Everyone's different.
Dad,
Emma's voice cut through the afternoon.
watch this.
Daniel looked up just in time to see his daughter leap from the climbing structure to the monkey bars, a gap of at least 5 feet, completely unnecessary and absolutely terrifying. His heart stopped. She caught the bars perfectly, swung twice for momentum, and proceeded to cross them using only every 3rd bar, because that was more interesting.
That seems unnecessary, Daniel called. It's more efficient this way. It's more likely to give me a heart attack this way.
You worry too much, Wright laughed. She's something else. Yeah, she is. Daniel watched his daughter drop from the bars and immediately run toward the swings. She's the best thing I've ever done. I believe that. They sat together as the afternoon stretched on.
Emma swung higher and higher, her hair streaming behind her, her laughter carrying across the park.
Eventually, Wright stood. I should get going. My daughter's patience for the slide is apparently infinite, but my wife's patience for late dinners isn't.
Good luck at Apex. It's a good place to work.
So I've heard. The director of safety systems integration has apparently changed the whole culture. Daniel smiled.
He had help.
Either way, it's nice to be somewhere that values judgment over parameters. Wright extended his hand. Thanks for the conversation.
Anytime.
Wright walked toward his daughter, scooped her up despite her protests, and headed for the parking lot. Daniel watched them go.
Who is that?
Emma asked, appearing beside him. She was breathing hard, her cheeks flushed from exertion. Just someone from work.
What did you talk about?
Flying, family, the things that matter. Emma sat down on the bench, leaning against his shoulder. She was getting too old for casual physical affection, or so she claimed, but sometimes, in quiet moments, she still sought it out.
Dad?
Yeah?
I've been thinking about something.
About what?
About what you told me 2 years ago. About choosing me over everything else.
Daniel wrapped an arm around her shoulders. What about it?
I used to think that was sad. That you had to give up something you loved because of me. She paused. But now I think maybe it wasn't sad at all. Maybe it was just right.
Why do you say that?
Because you're happy now. Really happy. Not the fake happy you used to do, where you smiled but your eyes were somewhere else. Actually happy. She looked up at him. And you couldn't have been actually happy if you'd kept flying and missed all this.
Daniel felt something swell in his chest. Pride, love, gratitude, all of it mixed together until he couldn't separate one from the other. You're right, he said. I couldn't have.
I know,
she grinned. I'm always right. Don't let it go to your head.
Too late.
They sat together as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The park slowly emptied around them, families heading home for dinner, children protesting that they weren't tired, parents carrying the exhausted ones who'd crashed mid-complaint.
Dad?
Yeah?
Can we get ice cream?
It's almost dinner time.
So?
Rules are just suggestions for people without imagination. That's still my philosophy. Your philosophy is going to give you cavities.
Worth it.
Daniel pretended to consider. 1 scoop.
2.
1.5.
Deal.
They walked to the car together,
Emma already debating the merits of cookie dough versus chocolate chip. Daniel listened to every word. The sky above them was infinite and blue. He didn't look up at it with longing anymore.
Didn't wonder what it would feel like to break through the clouds, to leave the earth behind, to become something more than human in the cold, thin air where only jets could reach. That life was over. This life was better. Reaper 6 had been someone important, someone skilled, someone who'd flown missions that officially never happened and made decisions that shaped conflicts nobody would ever know about. But Daniel Cole was someone more important. He was a father, a protector, a man who'd chosen love over glory, family over career, presence over power. He was someone who came home at 5:45 every single day without exception. He was someone who burned eggs and made bad jokes and took 47 photos at science fairs. He was someone who sat on park benches and watched his daughter defy gravity with the confidence of a person who'd never been taught that limits existed. The call signs stayed buried. The files stayed sealed. The past stayed past. But the present, this moment, this evening, this walk to the car with his daughter's voice filling the air, this was everything. Some people left behind classified records and military citations. Some left patent portfolios and quarterly earnings reports. Some left monuments and memorials and chapters in history books. Daniel Cole would leave something else. A daughter who knew her father would always be there. A company that had learned judgment mattered more than parameters. A culture that understood the most important safety system wasn't technology at all. It was a human being willing to say, "Wait, I've seen this before." And a legacy that couldn't be measured in medals or money or fame. A legacy measured in moments. In ice cream runs and science fairs and Sunday afternoons in the park. In every time he'd said, "I love you," and meant it more than he'd ever meant anything. In the simple, irreplaceable act of being present. The sky was still infinite. But Daniel Cole didn't need to fly through it to feel whole. Because everything he'd ever needed, everything he'd ever wanted, everything that had ever truly mattered, it was right here beside him. And it always would be. The end.